Chapter 1. The future she could see. Jenny Carter never understood people who claimed they just knew when they had found the right person. It always sounded suspiciously like something from a greeting card. Real life wasn't supposed to work that way. And yet, as she sat curled against Mark Gillis on their apartment couch on a quiet Saturday evening, she found herself thinking exactly that. Not because of some grand romantic gesture. Not because of fireworks. Not because of destiny. Because Mark was sitting beside her silently reading a news article while she pretended to watch a cooking competition neither of them cared about. The comfortable silence felt like home. You've been staring at the television for 10 minutes without blinking. Jenny glanced up. Mark hadn't looked away from his phone. How do you know? You stopped laughing. There wasn't anything funny. There was a guy who set a cake on fire. Jenny considered that. Okay, fair point. A smile tugged at the corner of Mark's mouth. Jenny leaned her head against his shoulder. His arm settled automatically around her. No hesitation. No performance. Just habit. One of her favorite things about Mark was that he never seemed interested in creating drama where none existed. If he was happy, he said so. If he was annoyed, he said so. If he loved her, he said that too. Simple. Reliable. Comfortable. She closed her eyes. 3.5 years together had turned thousands of little moments into something solid. She could picture the next phase of their lives without much effort. A house someday. A dog. Possibly children. Definitely a bigger kitchen. You're doing it again. She opened one eye. What? Thinking. Mark finally looked at her. The blue-gray eyes she'd spent years memorizing narrowed slightly. The serious kind. You can tell the difference? Absolutely. She laughed. That's mildly terrifying. You wrinkle your nose. I do not. You do. I absolutely do not. Mark reached over and lightly tapped the end of her nose. You just did. Jenny swatted his hand away. He looked entirely too pleased with himself. Their front door opened without warning. Neither of them jumped. The only person who entered the apartment without knocking was Sarah. Why is nobody ever concerned when I walk into their homes? Sarah called. Because you have a key, Jenny shouted back. Oh, pause. Good point. Sarah appeared in the living room carrying takeout containers. Jenny laughed as her best friend dropped onto the opposite end of the couch. I brought food. You ate dinner here yesterday, Mark said. I know. You were here Thursday too. I know. At this point, you're basically paying rent emotionally. Sarah gasped. Jenny, are you hearing this abuse? Jenny nodded solemnly. It's terrible. Thank you. You should probably bring more food. Sarah stared at her. Then both women burst out laughing. Mark shook his head. It was a familiar routine. Sarah worked at the same company as Jenny. They spent all day together. Then somehow spent half their evenings together too. The arrangement had evolved naturally over the years. Since Jenny and Mark lived together, it was usually easier for Sarah to come to them. Mark never complained. At least not seriously. By the time Sunday arrived, Jenny's suitcase sat beside the apartment door. The upcoming corporate training session had become the topic of conversation for weeks. A full week at company headquarters. Mandatory attendance. Flights, hotel rooms, workshops, networking events. The whole package. Jenny wasn't particularly excited about leaving. Not because she disliked travel. Because she liked her life at home. There was something deeply satisfying about having a place she actually wanted to return to. Mark carried her suitcase down to the car. You remembered your charger? Yes. Laptop? Yes. Training packet? Yes. Toothbrush. Jenny stopped halfway to the parking lot. Wait. Mark laughed. I'm kidding. You are the worst. I know. The drive to the airport passed comfortably. Jenny talked about the upcoming week. Mark listened. The way he always did. When they arrived, he parked and walked inside with her instead of dropping her off curbside. Another small thing. Another one of the reasons she loved him. They stood together near security for nearly 20 minutes. Neither seemed in a hurry to say goodbye. Finally, boarding announcements began appearing on the overhead screens. Jenny glanced toward the security checkpoint, then back at Mark. Well. Neither moved. She smiled. This is the part where normal people say goodbye. Seems inefficient. I thought you liked efficiency. Not this kind. Jenny stepped closer. He wrapped his arms around her. The familiar scent of his cologne settled around her. For a moment she considered refusing to get on the plane. Purely on principle. 1 week, Mark said. I know. You'll survive. I might not. You're very dramatic. That's one of my best qualities. No. He kissed her forehead. That's not even in the top 10. She laughed, then kissed him. Nothing extraordinary. Nothing cinematic. Just the sort of kiss shared by two people who fully expected to see each other again in a few days. When they separated, neither realized they were standing inside the last conversation they would ever have as a couple. Call me when you land, Mark said. I always do. I know. Jenny smiled. I love you. Mark didn't hesitate. He never did. I love you too. Then she turned and headed toward security. Halfway through the line she looked back. Mark was still standing there, waiting. He raised one hand. She waved back. A few minutes later, she disappeared from view. Mark eventually walked away, and Jenny boarded her plane believing the hardest part of the week would be surviving corporate training sessions. She had absolutely no idea that her entire future was already moving toward a single text message she would never send. Chapter 2. One bad joke. The training sessions were exactly as exciting as Jenny had expected, which was to say they weren't exciting at all. By Tuesday evening, her brain felt overcooked. She and Sarah stepped out of the last conference room shortly after 6 o'clock, both carrying notebooks full of information they would probably never use. "I'm convinced half of today's presentation was generated by a machine," Sarah said. Jenny laughed. "The part with the 27-slide deck about communication strategies? Especially that part. I'm pretty sure the presenter repeated the same point 12 different ways. He repeated it 13. You counted. I had nothing else to do." They exited into the hotel lobby. The headquarters campus sat several miles outside the city, and most attendees had chosen to spend the evening at the hotel rather than go out. Jenny was perfectly happy with that decision. All she wanted was comfortable clothes, room service, and absolutely no discussions about productivity metrics. The moment they reached their room, she kicked off her shoes. Sarah threw herself dramatically across one of the beds. "I live here now. You literally have your own bed. This one feels more emotionally supportive." Jenny rolled her eyes. An hour later, both women sat on the couch in comfortable pajamas, watching a reality show while sharing a bottle of wine. They had intended to open it as a small reward for surviving another day. The problem was that one bottle quietly became two. At first, it barely registered. The conversation remained normal. Work gossip, funny stories, vacation plans, Sarah's latest disastrous dating experience. Jenny laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Felt good. Relaxing. Easy. The kind of evening friends rarely planned but often remembered. Around 10:30, Jenny checked her phone. A smile appeared immediately. Mark had sent her a picture. A frozen pizza sat on a baking tray. The crust was completely black. Jenny burst out laughing. "What?" She showed Sarah the photo. Beneath it was a text message. "Attempted dinner. Ordered takeout instead." Sarah laughed. "Oh my God." Jenny quickly replied. "Your culinary skills continue to impress me." Almost immediately another message appeared. "I have many talents. Cooking isn't one of them." Warm affection spread through her chest. Even hundreds of miles apart, talking to Mark never felt forced. Never felt complicated. Their conversations flowed as naturally as breathing. "What are you smiling about?" Sarah asked. "Nothing. That's the smile." "What smile?" "The Mark smile." Jenny threw a couch pillow at her. Sarah caught it. "You absolutely have one." "I do not." "You do." "I really don't. You get all soft and annoying." Jenny laughed despite herself. A moment later, her phone buzzed again. "Miss you." The smile returned immediately. "Miss you too." She stared at the screen for a second, then added, 3 more days." His response arrived seconds later. "Can't wait." Jenny locked the phone. Sometimes things really could be that simple. By 11 o'clock, the wine had finally started catching up with her. The room felt pleasantly warm. The television was becoming harder to follow. She yawned. "Okay," she announced. "I'm officially done." Sarah glanced over. "Already? We have team building tomorrow. We don't have to be there until noon." "That doesn't mean I want to feel like death." "Fair." Jenny stood carefully. The floor tilted slightly. Not enough to be concerning. Just enough to be noticeable. "Good night." "Night. You coming to bed soon?" Sarah lifted her wine glass. "I'll finish this and the episode." Jenny narrowed her eyes. "That's exactly how bad decisions start." Sarah grinned. "Relax. I'll be in bed in like 20 minutes. Jenny pointed at her warningly before disappearing into the bedroom area. By the time she climbed beneath the sheets, she was asleep within minutes. Out in the sitting area, Sarah continued watching television. The second bottle emptied slowly. One glass became 2. The room became fuzzier. The show became funnier than it probably was. At some point, her attention drifted to the coffee table. Jenny's phone sat beside a hotel brochure. Sarah stared at it. An idea formed. A stupid idea. Profoundly stupid idea. Unfortunately, alcohol had a remarkable ability to disguise stupidity as brilliance. She grabbed the phone. The screen lit up. A laugh escaped her. "Oh my God." The thought seemed hilarious. A harmless prank. Just enough to annoy Mark. Nothing serious. She opened the messages. Found his conversation. Then typed, "Hey, I wanted to let you know I met a cute guy at the bar, but don't worry. I'm coming home to you." Sarah giggled while reading it. It was ridiculous. Obviously ridiculous. Nobody would believe it. Especially Mark. He knew Jenny. He'd immediately realize something was wrong. Or he'd get annoyed for 5 seconds. Then she'd send the reveal. Tell him it was Sarah. Everyone would laugh tomorrow. A harmless joke. She hit send. Then nearly dropped the phone because she was already laughing. "Okay," she told herself. "Now explain it." That had been the entire plan. Send the joke. then immediately admit it. Simple. Except another glass of wine suddenly sounded important. She stood, walked toward the kitchenette, returned with the glass, sat down, picked up the remote, watched another 5 minutes of television. Then 10, then 20. The explanation quietly slipped from her mind. The phone slid beside her. The wine disappeared. Sarah's eyelids grew heavier. By midnight, she was unconscious on the couch. Jenny's phone slipping from her hand and falling partly beneath the furniture. A few minutes later, a notification sounded. Neither woman heard it. The screen illuminated briefly. One new message. One word. Understood. Then darkness returned. Jenny woke Thursday morning with a pounding headache. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Hotel ceiling. Strange room. Then the week rushed back. Training. Travel. Sarah. Conference. Everything. She groaned. Coffee. She desperately needed coffee. Jenny emerged from the bedroom area around 9. The first thing she noticed was Sarah sitting bolt upright on the couch. The second thing she noticed was the expression on her friend's face. Pure horror. Sarah? No response. Sarah? Sarah looked at her. Her face had gone completely pale. Immediately, Jenny's stomach tightened. What happened? Sarah swallowed. Hard. What happened? Jenny repeated. For several seconds, Sarah simply stared. Then fragments of memory began visibly rearranging themselves behind her eyes. The wine. The couch. The phone. The text. The intended explanation. The explanation she never sent. Oh no. Jenny frowned. What? Oh no. Sarah. Tears instantly appeared in Sarah's eyes, and Jenny's pulse started climbing. Fast. What did you do? Sarah stood so suddenly she nearly tripped. We need to find your phone. The fear in her voice made Jenny freeze. What did you do? We need your phone. Sarah. Her voice cracked. For the first time, Jenny saw genuine panic. Not embarrassment. Not discomfort. Panic. Sarah began searching frantically, moving cushions, checking tables, looking beneath furniture. Her hands were shaking. Sarah. Finally, Sarah looked at her, tears streaming down her face. And Jenny knew, whatever came next was going to be bad. Very bad. I sent Mark a text. Every muscle in Jenny's body tightened. What text? Sarah started crying. The answer took several attempts, the words emerging between sobs. When she finally finished explaining, Jenny simply stood there, staring, certain she had misunderstood. You what? It was supposed to be a joke. A joke. I wasn't thinking. You texted my boyfriend that I met another guy. I was going to explain. Jenny felt the room spinning. Not from the wine. From terror. Raw terror. Because she knew Mark. She knew exactly how Mark thought. And suddenly she wasn't worried about a misunderstanding. She was worried about certainty. Complete certainty. 20 agonizing minutes later they found the phone, partially hidden beneath the couch. Jenny grabbed it, her hands trembling. The message thread opened immediately. She saw the text, the one Sarah had sent. Then the reply. A single word. Understood. Jenny's heart dropped. Gone. Just gone. Because she knew exactly what that meant. There was no argument in that word. No anger. No accusation. No attempt to negotiate. It wasn't a response. It was a conclusion. She hit the call button. The call failed. Jenny stared. Tried again. Failed. Her blood ran cold. No. She opened social media. Nothing. Blocked. Again. Blocked. Again. Blocked. His profile vanished everywhere she looked. Then his family. His sister. His mother. His father. Blocked. 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 Every doorway closed. One after another. Sarah was crying openly now. I'm sorry. Jenny wasn't listening. She stared at the phone. At that single word. Understood. She imagined receiving a similar message from Mark. Imagined someone texting her that he had met another woman. That he would be coming home anyway. She imagined seeing that on her screen. And for the first time since waking up, she understood something horrible. She would have believed it too. Not because she didn't trust him. Because nobody joked like that. Nobody. There would be no explanation she would accept. No justification. No excuse. Trust didn't survive messages like that. And without trust, what future was left? The realization hit with brutal clarity. Mark hadn't ended their relationship after a fight. He hadn't left after weeks of problems. He hadn't even left after a conversation. As far as he knew, she had simply told him the truth. And he had believed her. Sarah collapsed into a chair. I'm sorry. Jenny finally looked at her. The devastation on Sarah's face was real. But somehow that made it worse. Because it changed nothing. The damage had already happened. Thousands of miles away from home. Because of one drunken joke. One sentence. One word. And suddenly Jenny knew, with terrifying certainty, that her life had just changed forever. Chapter 3. Gone. The rest of Thursday passed in a blur. Jenny attended training sessions. She took notes. She answered questions when managers called on her. At least she assumed she did. Later she couldn't remember a single thing that happened. Everything felt distant, muted, like she was watching someone else move through the day while her real self sat frozen in that hotel room staring at the word understood. Sarah stayed close all day. Too close. Every time Jenny looked at her, a painful mixture of emotions surfaced. Anger, pity, guilt, heartbreak. Sarah had cried so hard in the morning that her eyes remained swollen throughout the day. She apologized repeatedly. Jenny didn't know how to respond anymore. The apology wasn't fixing anything. The damage had already been done. By Friday evening, the training session finally ended. Most attendees were celebrating. People gathered in the hotel bar. Groups exchanged numbers and business cards. Jenny wanted none of it. She wanted to go home. She wanted to see Mark, even if he yelled, even if he refused to listen, even if she spent hours convincing him. There had to be a conversation. 3.5 years deserved at least that. The flight home felt endless. Sarah sat beside her in silence. Several times she attempted to speak. Every time she stopped herself. Jenny appreciated that. At the moment, there was nothing left to say. The plane landed shortly after 4 in the afternoon. The familiar airport should have felt comforting. Instead, anxiety settled deeper into Jenny's chest. Her phone remained unchanged. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. The ride home was worse. Every mile increased her certainty that something was wrong. Mark wasn't impulsive. He wasn't dramatic. If he had blocked her immediately, then he believed exactly what he saw. And if he believed it, he would act accordingly. The apartment building came into view. Jenny's heartbeat accelerated. She grabbed her suitcase and hurried toward the entrance. Sarah followed behind. Neither spoke. The elevator ride felt unbearable. 3rd floor. Doors opening. Hallway. Apartment 317. Home. Jenny reached the door. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped her keys. Then she unlocked it and stepped inside. For a moment nothing seemed unusual. The living room looked normal. The couch remained where it always had. The television. The coffee table. The bookshelves. Everything appeared unchanged. Then she noticed the empty space beside the entertainment center. Mark's guitar was gone. Her stomach dropped. No. She moved farther inside. Faster now. The bedroom. The closet. The dresser. Half the hangers were missing. The shelves stood partially empty. The suitcase Mark always used for trips was gone. His shoes. Gone. His jackets. Gone. Bathroom. Gone. Kitchen. Gone. Jenny stood frozen. The silence inside the apartment felt enormous. 3.5 years had disappeared with terrifying efficiency. Sarah appeared in the bedroom doorway. One look told her everything. Oh God. Jenny didn't answer. She walked to the closet again. Then opened drawers she knew were empty. Then checked the bathroom again. As if she might somehow discover she was mistaken. She wasn't. Mark was gone. Really gone. The realization hit harder than the text. Harder than the blocking. Because this wasn't digital anymore. This was physical. Real. Every absent object felt like a confirmation. Every empty space another goodbye. Then she noticed something strange. The framed photo from their first vacation. Still there. The picture from her cousin's wedding. Still there. The concert tickets they'd framed together. Still there. Jenny moved toward the bookshelf. Every photograph remained. Every gift. Every souvenir. Every keepsake from their relationship. All left behind. As though Mark had carefully removed himself while refusing to take any shared memory with him. That hurt most of all. The message felt unmistakable. Those belong to you now. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. Sarah stepped forward. Jenny, don't. Her voice cracked. Sarah stopped immediately. Jenny sat heavily on the edge of the bed. She looked around the room. Everywhere she turned, she found evidence that someone had once lived there. And evidence that they no longer did. A knock interrupted the silence. Both women jumped. Sarah answered the door. An older woman stood outside. Mrs. Alvarez, their landlord. When she saw Jenny, her expression softened. Oh, sweetheart. Jenny immediately knew. You've seen him. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. He left 3 days ago. The words landed like stones. 3 days. Mark had already been gone for 3 days. He paid his portion of the rent through the end of the lease. Jenny blinked. What? He came to see me personally. Said there had been a change in circumstances. Mrs. Alvarez hesitated. He wanted to make sure you weren't financially stranded. That sounded exactly like Mark. Painfully, unmistakably like Mark. Even leaving, he had been thinking about her. Mrs. Alvarez handed over an envelope. He asked me to give you this if you came looking. Jenny took it. Her hands trembled. The envelope contained only a single piece of paper. She unfolded it. The note was written in Mark's familiar handwriting. Jenny, the rent is covered through the remainder of the lease. Utilities are already arranged and will continue without interruption. You don't need to worry about any shared accounts. Everything has been separated. I truly hope you have a good life. Mark, nothing else. No accusation. No anger. No insults. No demands. Just practical information and a farewell. Jenny felt something inside her shatter. Sarah read it over her shoulder and burst into fresh tears. He really thinks, I know what he thinks. Jenny folded the paper carefully. Too carefully. As if rough handling might make it disappear. Mrs. Alvarez looked between them, concern evident in her eyes. I'm sorry. Jenny managed a small nod. After the landlord left, silence returned. A few minutes later, Jenny's phone rang. She answered immediately. Mom. Honey. Her mother's voice sounded relieved. When did you get home? Just now. A pause. You found the apartment? Jenny closed her eyes. You know. We know. Another pause. Then softly, Mark came by. The words hurt even though she'd expected them. When? The day after he left. Jenny swallowed hard. What happened? Her mother hesitated, then answered. He brought your father's tools back. That surprised her. Mark had borrowed them months ago for a furniture project. He sat with us for nearly an hour. Jenny gripped the phone tighter. Her father came onto speaker. His voice sounded unusually subdued. Jenny, he wasn't angry. That somehow made everything worse. He showed us the text. Jenny felt tears gathering again. He didn't yell. Her father sighed. He didn't call you names. Her mother continued quietly. He said he thought the two of you wanted the same future. Jenny closed her eyes. Every word felt like a knife. He said that after reading that message, he couldn't move forward. Neither parent spoke for several seconds. Finally, her mother added, he asked us not to be angry with you. Jenny's breath caught. What? He said relationships are complicated. Her father's voice was rough. He told us he didn't want us choosing sides. The tears came harder now. Even at the end. Even after believing she betrayed him. He had protected her. The call ended shortly afterward. Jenny sat motionless for a long time. The living room gradually darkened around her. Sarah remained nearby but wisely silent. Eventually Jenny stood, walked to the window, looked out over the parking lot. For the first time since this nightmare began, something shifted inside her. The grief remained. The heartbreak remained. But beneath both, another emotion appeared. Determination. She understood why Mark believed the text. Honestly, she would have believed it too. She even understood why he left. What she couldn't accept was the ending. 3.5 years had earned one conversation. One honest conversation. One chance to tell the truth while looking him in the eye. Maybe he would still walk away. Maybe nothing would change. But she refused to let a drunken prank become the final word on the most important relationship of her life. Jenny stared out the window as the last sunlight disappeared. Somewhere out there, Mark was living his life, believing a lie, and if he thought she would simply accept that and move on without a fight, then he hadn't been paying attention. Chapter 4. Following ghosts. The first week after Jenny returned home was somehow both endless and impossibly fast. Days passed. Nothing changed. Mark remained gone. The worst part wasn't waking up alone. It wasn't the empty closet. It wasn't even the silence. It was the absence of possibilities. No matter how many times she checked her phone, no missed messages appeared. No calls. No angry texts. No demands for explanations. Nothing. Mark had vanished so completely that it felt like trying to argue with a ghost. By the following Saturday, Jenny was sitting at her kitchen table staring at a cold cup of coffee. The apartment felt unfamiliar. Not because the furniture had changed, because the future attached to it had. Every room reminded her of plans that no longer existed. Across from her sat Sarah, their first real attempt at spending time together since the disaster. The atmosphere was painful. The friendship that had once felt effortless now felt fragile. Sarah looked exhausted. She had lost weight. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. Jenny didn't think she'd slept properly in days. Neither had she. I found something. Jenny looked up. Sarah slid her phone across the table. A social media profile. One belonging to one of Mark's college friends. Jenny frowned. What is it? He posted pictures last weekend. Jenny stared. There were 6 photos. Most were ordinary. Friends at a backyard barbecue. People laughing. Food. Drinks. Then she saw him. Mark. Standing near a grill. Paper plate in one hand. Looking exactly like himself. Except somehow not. Jenny zoomed in. Her chest tightened. The photograph was only a few days old. And for the first time since he'd disappeared, she had proof he still existed somewhere. You found this how? Sarah winced. I may have spent an unhealthy amount of time searching. Jenny couldn't even be annoyed. I appreciate it. Sarah swallowed. The relief on her face was obvious, as though she'd been afraid Jenny would reject even that. For a moment neither woman spoke. Then Sarah quietly said, I'm sorry. Jenny closed her eyes. Not again. Not because she didn't believe the apology. Because there was nothing new to say about it. Finally she sighed. I know. I really didn't think. I know. Sarah looked down. Jenny studied her. Her friend looked miserable. Genuinely miserable. There was no defensiveness. No excuses. Only regret. An uncomfortable truth had started settling into Jenny's mind over the past week. The prank had been stupid. Catastrophically stupid. But Sarah hadn't wanted this. Nobody was suffering from the situation more than Jenny, but Sarah was suffering too. Not because she'd been punished, because she'd hurt someone she loved. That didn't erase what happened. It simply made hating her more difficult. Jenny rubbed her forehead. I need to find him. Sarah nodded immediately. I know. No, I really need to find him. She met her friend's eyes. I'm losing my mind. The words came out more honestly than she'd intended. Sarah didn't laugh, because they were true. Jenny was losing her mind. Every day brought new questions. Where had he gone? Was he still angry? Was he dating someone? Did he miss her at all? Did he ever think about calling? The uncertainty hurt more than certainty ever could. Sarah tapped the photo. Then let's find him. Jenny blinked. Yes. You think I'm letting you help? Sarah looked surprisingly determined. I owe you. Jenny almost laughed. You owe me a functioning life. Exactly. That seems difficult to repay. Sarah managed a weak smile. Let's start small. For the first time in days, Jenny felt something other than sadness. Not happiness. Not hope. Purpose. Their investigation began badly. Almost impressively badly. The college friend whose social media account contained the photo ignored every message. 3 mutual acquaintances had no information. Another hadn't spoken to Mark in over 2 years. One woman somehow concluded Jenny was attempting to recruit him into a pyramid scheme. It was not a productive afternoon. By Monday evening, Jenny was sitting in her car after work when another setback arrived. An old mutual friend finally answered, only to inform her that Mark had moved. Moved where? No idea. Jenny closed her eyes. At all? Nope. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. She ended the call and rested her forehead against the steering wheel. A moment later, someone tapped the car window. Jenny nearly screamed. Sarah stood outside holding 2 coffees. Jenny unlocked the passenger door. One day you're going to kill me. Sarah climbed inside. I brought caffeine. What if I'd had a heart attack? You seem alive. Barely. Sarah handed her a coffee, then settled into her seat. Bad news. Jenny explained. Sarah listened patiently. When she finished, neither woman spoke for several moments. Finally, Sarah said, you know what's really annoying? What? He's handling this exactly the way you'd expect. Jenny laughed despite herself, because that was true. Painfully true. Mark wasn't posting dramatic updates. He wasn't complaining online. He wasn't creating scenes. He had simply made a decision and acted on it, just like he always did. The consistency would have been admirable if it weren't ruining her life. 3 days later, Jenny got her first real lead. The source was unexpected. Her father. She arrived for dinner and found him waiting with a thoughtful expression. Something wrong? Maybe. Her father set down his fork. When Mark came by before he left, we talked for a while. Jenny immediately sat straighter. What about? A lot of things. He looked uncomfortable. I didn't mention it before because I wasn't sure it mattered. Her heartbeat accelerated. Dad. He mentioned a friend. Jenny leaned forward. What friend? A college roommate. Her father frowned while trying to remember. David, maybe? Jenny's pulse jumped. Mark had always been close with David Mercer. She hadn't thought about him because he'd moved away years ago. Where? Colorado. Jenny froze. Colorado. Her father nodded. That's all I've got. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had yesterday. That night, Jenny sat at her laptop searching. Within 20 minutes, she found David's public profile. Within 30 minutes, she found a recent photograph. And within 31 minutes, she found Mark. Again. This time standing beside David at what appeared to be a baseball game. The picture had been taken in Denver. Jenny stared at it. Denver. Colorado. A real place. A real lead. For nearly 2 weeks, Mark had seemed untouchable. Now suddenly he existed on a map. Sarah arrived 20 minutes later. Jenny practically dragged her toward the computer. I found him. Sarah's eyes widened. You found him? I found him. Oh my God. I know. The 2 women stared at the screen, then at each other, then back at the screen. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Sarah asked, what now? Jenny looked at the photograph, at Mark's familiar face, at the man she still loved, the man who genuinely believed she had betrayed him, the man who had ended their life together because of a lie. A decision settled firmly into place, the kind that arrives fully formed, certain, clear. I go talk to him. Sarah blinked. Colorado. Colorado. That's 1,200 miles away. Then it's a very long conversation. Sarah burst out laughing. The unexpected sound startled both of them. It was the first genuine laugh either woman had managed in weeks. Then Sarah became serious. When? Jenny looked at the screen one final time. As soon as possible. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, she finally knew where to start looking. And she wasn't letting that chance disappear. Chapter 5. The road trip disaster. Jenny had imagined many ways this trip could begin. None of them involved her car refusing to start. She sat behind the steering wheel staring at the dashboard. The engine clicked. Then nothing. She tried again. More clicking. No life. No. No, no, no. Beside her, Sarah sank lower into the passenger seat. This feels symbolic. Jenny glared at her. Don't. I'm just saying the universe may be trying to tell us something. The universe can pay for a new battery then. 30 minutes later, they were standing in an auto parts store parking lot while a technician replaced the battery. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sun had barely risen. The road trip had already suffered its first catastrophe. Neither woman considered turning back. By 8 o'clock, they were finally headed west. Colorado waited somewhere far beyond the horizon. So did Mark. That single fact was enough to keep Jenny moving. For the first few hours, they made surprisingly good time. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. Music played softly. Traffic remained light. The atmosphere almost felt normal. Then Sarah spoke. I've been thinking. Jenny groaned. That sentence has caused enough damage. Fair. Sarah looked out the window, then back at Jenny. You know he might still not want to hear it. The words hung in the air. Jenny nodded. I know. He might listen and still walk away. I know. Okay. Several minutes passed. Then Jenny quietly added, but at least it'll be after hearing the truth. Sarah nodded. Neither spoke again for a while. The first hotel looked much nicer online. By the time they arrived shortly after midnight, exhaustion had erased most of Jenny's patience. The clerk handed them a room key. 5 minutes later, they entered their room, then immediately exited. A strange smell lingered in the air. The television sat upside down on a chair. Nobody could determine why. Half the curtains were missing. Were we assigned a room or a crime scene? Sarah asked. They returned to the front desk. The replacement room wasn't much better. They stayed anyway. At that point, sleep mattered more than standards. The next morning, Sarah emerged from the bathroom carrying a tiny bottle. What is this? Jenny looked up from her coffee. Shampoo. Sarah examined the label. It's dish soap. Jenny blinked. It is not. It absolutely is. Several seconds passed. Then they both started laughing. The laughter grew harder and harder until tears formed. The sort of exhausted laughter that bordered on insanity. We're losing our minds, Jenny said. Absolutely. That was somehow comforting. For the first time since the breakup, Jenny felt something close to her old self. Not whole, but closer. The second day brought new problems. A wrong exit added nearly 2 hours to their drive. Sarah dropped her phone into a gas station toilet. A flock of birds somehow managed to cover most of Jenny's windshield during a 10-minute stop. The universe appeared committed to testing them. By evening, they were eating dinner at a roadside diner. Jenny sat quietly staring into her coffee. The conversation around them faded into background noise. Sarah noticed immediately. What's wrong? Jenny hesitated, then answered honestly. What if I'm too late? Sarah didn't joke, didn't deflect, didn't offer fake optimism. What do you mean? Jenny looked down. What if he's already moved on? The question had been growing inside her for days. Now it finally escaped. What if he doesn't even miss me anymore? Sarah leaned back, thinking, then said, I doubt that. Why? Because normal people don't erase their entire lives in 3 days. Jenny stared at her. Sarah continued. He left because he was hurt. The statement landed heavily. He didn't leave because he stopped caring. Jenny looked away. Part of her desperately wanted to believe that. Another part feared believing it would only make everything hurt worse. Late the following afternoon, they finally reached Denver. The city skyline appeared in the distance. Jenny's pulse immediately accelerated. This was it. The place where Mark supposedly was. The place where she'd finally get answers. Or heartbreak. Possibly both. Their first stop was David Mercer's apartment building. Unfortunately, David wasn't home. The concierge informed them politely that residents' information wasn't shared with strangers. An understandable policy. An infuriating one. By 6 o'clock, they had accomplished absolutely nothing. Once again. At this point, Jenny was beginning to suspect the universe actively disliked her. Then luck intervened. Pure, ridiculous luck. The two women were leaving a grocery store when Sarah suddenly grabbed Jenny's arm. Hard. Ouch. Don't look. You're hurting me. Don't look. Naturally, Jenny looked immediately, then froze. Across the parking lot stood David Mercer, holding 2 grocery bags. Jenny's heart nearly stopped, because standing beside him was Mark. For a moment, the entire world disappeared. No cars, no people, no sound, just him. He looked exactly the same. Same dark hair, same posture, same steady movement. The sight hit her with surprising force. A month hadn't changed him physically, but something felt different, subtle, difficult to name. He looked quieter, older somehow, as though the past few weeks had weighed on him too. Jenny took an unconscious step forward. Mark hadn't seen her yet. Neither had David. The distance between them couldn't have been more than 50 yards. The closest she'd been since the airport. The airport, the final kiss, the goodbye neither of them knew was permanent. Until now, Jenny's throat tightened. She had spent weeks imagining this moment, rehearsing it, planning it. Now every prepared word vanished. Gone. Sarah looked at her. You okay? No. Reasonable. Jenny laughed weakly, then drew a slow breath. Across the parking lot, Mark shifted one of the grocery bags and turned slightly. For the first time, his eyes landed on her. Everything stopped. The recognition was immediate. Absolute. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Mark was never dramatic. Just a slight widening of his eyes. A brief flicker of surprise. Nothing more. Neither moved. They simply stared. Two people separated by a parking lot and one terrible misunderstanding. Jenny couldn't read what he was thinking. Couldn't guess what he felt. But he wasn't walking away. Not yet. For the first time since this nightmare began, they occupied the same place. The same moment. The same reality. And somehow that felt like progress. Even if neither of them knew what came next. Chapter 6. The conversation. For several seconds, nobody moved. The parking lot continued around them. Cars rolled past. Shopping carts rattled across pavement. People came and went. Yet Jenny noticed none of it. She saw only Mark. The man she'd spent weeks trying to find. The man she'd crossed multiple states to reach. The man who was staring back at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. David looked between them. Then at Mark. Then at Jenny. Oh. A beat passed. Then another. Oh. Mark finally shifted his attention toward his friend. You can say it a third time. David blinked. I should probably leave. No argument here, Sarah muttered. David looked relieved. Excellent. He handed one grocery bag to Mark. I suddenly remembered something very important. You don't even know where you're going. I'll figure it out. A few seconds later, he was walking away with suspicious speed. Sarah watched him go. Smart man. Neither Jenny nor Mark responded. The silence stretched. The distance between them suddenly felt far too large. Then Jenny took a step forward. Mark didn't retreat. Another step. Then another. Soon only a few feet separated them. Close enough to see details. Close enough to notice the faint shadows beneath his eyes. Close enough to realize he looked as tired as she felt. Neither spoke immediately. Jenny's carefully rehearsed speech had vanished completely. Every version she'd planned dissolved the moment she saw him. In the end, she settled for honesty. Hi. Mark blinked once. Hi. Not exactly the dramatic reunion she'd imagined. Jenny laughed nervously. I drove 1,200 miles for that. A tiny smile threatened the corner of his mouth. It disappeared quickly. The sight hurt. Not because he wasn't smiling. Because she remembered how easily he used to smile around her. The memory sat between them. Heavy. Awkward. Painful. Jenny drew a slow breath. Can we talk? Mark looked away briefly. Then back. You came all this way. That's not an answer. No. His voice remained calm. Always calm. I suppose it isn't. The familiar steadiness almost broke her. She'd missed hearing it. Missed hearing him. Mark glanced toward the apartment building. There's a park nearby. Jenny nodded immediately. Okay. Neither mentioned Sarah. Or David. The two spectators exchanged a look. Then silently vanished in opposite directions. 10 minutes later they sat on opposite ends of a bench overlooking a small lake. Children played in the distance. A dog chased a tennis ball. The normality of the setting felt bizarre. Jenny's heart was hammering so hard she thought she might be sick. Mark sat quietly, waiting, the way he always did, never rushing, never interrupting. And suddenly she understood that the first move was hers. It had to be. She looked down, then back at him. The text wasn't from me. No reaction. Not because he didn't hear, because he'd expected her to say it. Jenny continued anyway. Sarah sent it. Still nothing. So she told him everything. Every detail. The wine. The television. The joke. The forgotten explanation. Finding the phone. The panic. The blocking. The flight home. Everything. She spoke without interruption for nearly 10 minutes. When she finished, silence returned. Mark stared across the water, thinking. Finally he asked one question. Did she tell you immediately? Jenny nodded. The minute she remembered. Another pause. Then another. Mark absorbed the information slowly, carefully, the way he approached everything important. Jenny clasped her hands together, trying to stop them from shaking. Say something. Mark exhaled. His eyes remained on the lake. When I got the text, his voice was quiet. I read it 6 times. Jenny felt her stomach drop. I figured. I thought maybe I misunderstood. He gave a small humorless laugh. But there wasn't much room for interpretation. No. The agreement hurt. But it was true. Mark finally looked toward her. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. Jenny hadn't expected that. What was it? He thought about it. Nothing. The answer surprised her. Then she saw the sadness behind it. I just sat there. His gaze drifted. I think I was in shock. Jenny closed her eyes briefly. Every word hurt, because she could picture it. Mark alone in their apartment, reading that message, believing it. I called David that night. That explained Colorado. He offered me a place to stay. Jenny swallowed hard. You left the next day. He nodded. The day after. A painful silence followed. Then Jenny asked the question she'd been carrying for weeks. Why didn't you talk to me? Mark looked genuinely confused, as if the answer were obvious. About what? The words stunned her. She stared. Mark continued. Jenny, the text wasn't asking forgiveness. His voice remained gentle. It wasn't saying you made a mistake. A knot formed in her throat. It was telling me something. She couldn't argue, because he was right. To someone receiving it, that was exactly what it looked like. I know. You said you'd met someone else. I know. You said you were coming home anyway. I know. The truth was brutal. Mark rubbed a hand across his face. I didn't think there was a conversation to have. For the first time, Jenny saw the heartbreak beneath the calm surface. Not anger. Heartbreak. The realization hit her unexpectedly. All this time she'd been focused on her own pain. She hadn't fully considered his. He'd loved her too. He'd been planning a future too. As far as he knew, she'd shattered it. I'm sorry. The words slipped out. Mark blinked. What? For what you went through. His expression softened slightly. You didn't send it. No. But I understand why you believed it. The admission seemed to catch him off guard. Jenny laughed sadly. If somebody had sent me that exact message from your phone, I would have believed it too. Neither spoke, because they both knew she was telling the truth. The honesty changed something. Small, but real. The conversation no longer felt like a trial. It felt like two people finally comparing scars. After a long silence, Jenny asked quietly, Did you ever miss me? The question escaped before she could stop it. Immediately she regretted asking. Mark looked out across the lake. For a moment she thought he might refuse to answer. Then, every day, the simple response stole her breath. He didn't elaborate, didn't dramatize, didn't cushion it, just told the truth. Every day. Jenny looked away before he could see tears filling her eyes. Then why leave all the pictures? A faint smile appeared. A real one this time. Small, tired, but real. You looked at that? Of course I looked at that. I figured those belonged to you. The answer somehow hurt and comforted her simultaneously. What about your copies? Mark glanced at her. There weren't any. Jenny stared, then laughed through her tears. Because of course there weren't. Mark had always been terrible about backing up photos. The absurdity cracked some of the tension between them. For the first time that afternoon, both smiled at the same moment. It lasted only seconds, but it happened. Eventually the smiles faded. Reality remained. The past month remained. The lost trust remained. Everything remained. Mark folded his hands. I believe you. Jenny froze. What? I believe you. She searched his face, looking for hesitation, doubt, anything. She found none. The words landed so suddenly she almost didn't know how to process them. You do. I do. Her eyes filled immediately. For a month she'd imagined convincing him, arguing, fighting, proving. Instead, after hearing the truth, he'd simply accepted it. Not because he was naive, because he knew her. The realization nearly broke her. But then came the question she feared most. What now? Mark looked down, then out at the water, then back to her. And when he answered, his voice held equal parts hope and caution. I don't know. For the first time since this nightmare began, neither did she. But at least they were finally asking the question together. Chapter 7. Starting over, the drive home felt completely different. Not because the distance had changed, because the uncertainty had. For the first time in more than a month, Jenny knew where she stood. Mark believed her. The lie was gone. The misunderstanding was gone. The text no longer stood between them. Unfortunately, reality still did. What now? Sarah asked for roughly the 8th time since they left Colorado. Jenny kept her eyes on the road. I still don't know. Sarah frowned. He believes you. I know. That's huge. It is. Then why don't you seem happier? Jenny considered that. The answer wasn't difficult. Because believing me doesn't magically undo everything. Sarah sank back into her seat. Neither woman spoke for several miles. Eventually Sarah nodded. Fair. The conversation at the park replayed endlessly in Jenny's mind during the trip home. Especially the ending. I don't know. Mark hadn't rejected her. He hadn't told her to leave. He hadn't asked her never to contact him again. But he also hadn't asked her to stay. He'd been honest. Painfully honest. And Jenny respected him for it. Even if part of her wished he had made things simpler. 3 days after returning home, her phone buzzed during lunch. Jenny almost ignored it. Then she saw the name. Mark. Her heart immediately attempted to escape her chest. She opened the message. Did you make it home safely? Jenny stared at the screen, then laughed. After 6 weeks of silence, that was the message. Not romance. Not reconciliation. Not dramatic declarations. Practical question. It was such a Mark text that she almost cried. Yes. We got back Monday evening. The typing indicator appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, good. Jenny rolled her eyes, then smiled. You drove away from our relationship and moved across the country. You're still terrible at texting. Several minutes passed. Then, that's probably fair. She laughed out loud. A coworker looked up from the next table. Jenny didn't care. For the first time in weeks, she felt lighter. Not healed. Not fixed. Lighter. The messages remained infrequent. First, one every few days. Then every day. Then several throughout the day. Nothing particularly romantic. Funny observations. Pictures. Stories about work. Small pieces of life. Exactly the way they had built their original relationship. One conversation at a time. Jenny resisted the urge to rush. She wanted everything back immediately. The apartment. The future. The certainty. But she knew better. Trust wasn't a light switch. Especially after something this painful. One evening she arrived home to find Sarah waiting outside her apartment door. I brought pizza. Jenny eyed her suspiciously. That's usually how you start bad ideas. Sarah nodded. True. They carried the food inside. A few minutes later they sat at the kitchen table. The atmosphere felt different than it had for weeks. Less tense. Less fragile. Not normal. But improving. Finally Sarah put down her slice. I need to ask something. Jenny waited. Sarah looked terrified. More terrified than she'd looked during the entire road trip. What? Sarah swallowed. Are we okay? The question hung heavily in the room. Jenny had known it was coming eventually. Still, she wasn't prepared. For several moments, neither woman moved. Jenny thought about the last 6 weeks. The grief. The anger. The sleepless nights. The empty apartment. The panic. The search. The drive. Everything. Then she thought about the woman sitting across from her. The woman who had spent weeks helping her find Mark. The woman who had apologized 1,000 times. The woman who hated herself for what happened. Finally Jenny answered. No. Sarah's face fell. Then Jenny continued. But I think we will be. Tears immediately appeared in Sarah's eyes. Jenny pointed a finger at her. Don't make me regret that. Sarah laughed through tears. The ridiculous sound made Jenny start laughing too. Soon both women were crying and laughing simultaneously. It was messy, awkward, and genuine. The friendship wasn't repaired that night, but it began healing, which was enough. Over the next 2 months, life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Work became normal again. Weekends stopped feeling so empty. The apartment felt less haunted. And Mark remained present. Not physically, yet, but consistently. One Thursday evening her phone rang. Not a text, a call. Jenny answered immediately. Hi. Hi. Just hearing his voice made her smile. They talked for nearly 2 hours. About everything and nothing. Movies, family, work, David, Sarah. The conversation flowed naturally, as though they were rediscovering something familiar. At one point Mark became unusually quiet. What? Jenny asked. Nothing. Then, I miss talking to you. Her eyes closed. The simple statement affected her more than any grand declaration could have. I miss talking to you too. The silence that followed felt comfortable. Not complicated. Comfortable. The way things used to feel. Eventually Mark cleared his throat. David is tired of me living here. Jenny laughed. I thought he liked having you around. He does. A pause. His girlfriend doesn't. That made her laugh harder. What did you do? I exist. Suspicious. I know. The warmth between them felt real. Fragile. But real. After they hung up, Jenny sat quietly on her couch, thinking. For the first time since the airport, she allowed herself to imagine a future again. A cautious future. A smaller future. One built slowly. Without assumptions. Without guarantees. But possible. And possibility was something she hadn't had in a very long time. 3 weeks later, Jenny was finishing work when another message arrived. She opened it absent-mindedly, then froze. Contained only one sentence. I'm coming back next weekend. Her pulse immediately accelerated. She read the text twice, 3 times. Then, for a visit? A response appeared. For good if you'll have me. Jenny stared at the screen. The office around her faded entirely. People moved. Phones rang. Conversations happened. She noticed none of it. Her hands trembled. Finally she typed. I think that's a conversation we should have in person. Several seconds passed. Then, I was hoping you'd say that. Jenny smiled so hard her face hurt. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be based on assumptions. Or a text. Or silence. This time, they would choose it together. Chapter 8. A better choice. Jenny spent the entire week trying not to stare at the calendar. She failed spectacularly. Every morning she checked the date. Every afternoon she checked the date. Every evening she checked the date. On Thursday, Sarah caught her doing it. You're looking at the calendar again. Jenny closed the browser window. No, I'm not. You absolutely are. I might be. Sarah nodded. Healthy. Thank you. That was sarcasm. I know. Sarah studied her for a moment, then smiled. You look happy. Jenny considered denying it. Instead, she sighed. I am. The admission felt frightening. Hope always seemed dangerous after heartbreak, but she couldn't deny it anymore. For the first time in months, she was looking forward instead of backward. Mark was coming home, not for a visit, home, and that meant everything was about to change. Again. Saturday arrived far more slowly than Jenny thought should be legally allowed. By noon, she had cleaned the apartment twice. By 2 o'clock, she'd reorganized her kitchen cabinets. By 3, she'd run out of productive ways to distract herself. At 3:30, her phone rang. Mark. Immediately. Hi. I'm downstairs. Jenny stood so quickly she nearly knocked over a chair. Already? I drove faster than expected. Please tell me you obeyed traffic laws. A pause. I obeyed most of them. She laughed, then froze, because suddenly it was real. He was here. Not in Colorado. Not on the phone. Not in a text message. Here. I'm coming down. Okay. The call ended. Jenny stood motionless for several seconds. Her pulse raced. Her stomach twisted into knots. This felt strangely similar to a first date. Except first dates usually didn't involve 3.5 years of history, a breakup, a cross-country search, and one catastrophic text message. Then she headed for the elevator. Mark was standing beside his car when she reached the parking lot. Sunlight caught his face. He looked up and smiled. Not the small, cautious smiles she'd seen in Colorado. A real smile. The familiar one. The one she'd spent months missing. Neither moved immediately. Then Jenny crossed the distance between them. And without thinking, she wrapped her arms around him. For one terrifying second she worried she might have assumed too much. Then his arms closed around her. Strong, certain, warm. Jenny shut her eyes. The relief nearly overwhelmed her. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply stood there, holding on. When they finally separated, Mark looked amused. What? Jenny asked. You nearly tackled me. I considered it. I noticed. You should feel honored. I do. The easy exchange felt familiar, comfortable, natural, like finding a favorite sweater you thought was lost. They spent the afternoon walking through town. No major decisions. No dramatic conversations. Just time together. The pressure that had existed in Colorado seemed smaller now. Not gone. Smaller. Eventually they found themselves in a quiet park. The same kind of place where difficult conversations always seem to happen. This time, however, neither wanted difficult. They wanted honest. Mark sat beside her on a bench. For several minutes they watched people pass. Finally he spoke. I was scared to come back. Jenny turned toward him. You? He nodded. Very. The answer surprised her. Mark usually appeared fearless, steady, unshakable. He laughed softly. I know what you're thinking. What? That I don't get scared. Jenny smiled. A little. I do. His expression became thoughtful. I wasn't sure what we'd find. We. Us. The simple word warmed her chest. Not you. Not me. Jenny looked down at her hands. Can I tell you something? Always. She took a breath. When I came home and saw the apartment, Mark became very still. I honestly thought my life was over. The words felt dramatic, yet they were true. Back then she couldn't imagine moving forward. Couldn't imagine healing. Couldn't imagine sitting here now. Mark listened quietly. His thumb traced the edge of the bench. I know the feeling. Jenny looked at him. The sadness in his eyes told her exactly what he meant. For a moment neither spoke. Then Mark said something she'd never expected. I'm sorry. She blinked. For what? I should have talked to you. Jenny stared at him. But I know why I didn't. His voice remained calm. I still think I know why. He looked away briefly, then back. But I should have talked to you. Emotion tightened her throat. No. He nodded. Yes. Mark. I made a decision with the information I had. A small smile appeared. That's usually one of my strengths. Usually? Usually. The smile faded. But I stopped asking questions. Jenny swallowed hard. Neither of them was entirely right. Neither entirely wrong. Life rarely worked that way. The realization felt strangely comforting. This wasn't a story about villains. It was a story about mistakes. Painful mistakes. Human mistakes. Eventually Mark turned toward her fully. I don't want what we had before. The statement stunned her. Her heart immediately dropped. Mark saw the reaction, then laughed. Not because it was bad. Oh, I loved what we had. Relief flooded through her. Okay. But I think we can do better. Jenny listened. We spent years assuming we'd always understand each other. He wasn't wrong. We got comfortable. We were comfortable. We were. The corner of his mouth lifted. Maybe a little too comfortable. Jenny laughed softly. Possibly. Mark's gaze held hers. I don't want assumptions anymore. Neither did she. I want conversations. Jenny nodded. Okay. I want honesty. Okay. I want us choosing each other on purpose. The tears arrived unexpectedly. Not from sadness. From relief. Because that's exactly what she wanted too. Okay. Mark smiled. Good. For a while they simply looked at each other. Then Jenny asked the question she already knew the answer to. What happens now? Mark's expression turned thoughtful, then warm. Now? Now. He reached for her hand. Gently, carefully, as though offering rather than taking. Jenny squeezed back immediately, and the smile that appeared on his face was brighter than any she'd seen since this nightmare began. Now, he said, we start over. Jenny leaned against his shoulder. The future still wasn't guaranteed. No future ever was. But for the first time since boarding that plane months ago, she wasn't worried about certainty. She wasn't worried about plans. She wasn't worried about what might happen years from now, because the man she loved was beside her. The truth had finally been spoken, and both of them were choosing the same direction again. One conversation at a time, one day at a time, one choice at a time, together. Epilogue. 1 year later, Sarah still wasn't allowed to touch anyone else's phone after 2 glasses of wine. This rule existed for reasons everyone understood, especially Sarah. Mark enjoyed reminding her whenever possible. Jenny enjoyed watching Sarah complain about it. And somewhere along the way, the story that nearly destroyed everything became something else. Not funny. Not entirely. Some memories never became funny, but survivable. The kind of story that reminded them how fragile trust could be, and how important honest conversations were when trust was tested. One evening, sitting between Mark and Sarah on the same couch where so many ordinary moments had happened, Jenny realized something. The future she had imagined years ago hadn't happened. It had fallen apart. Completely. What they had now wasn't the future she'd expected. It was better, because this one had been chosen twice.